you think that cowboying obviously would be a great school of leadership?
Yes, and I think the U.S. presidents that you just alluded to, especially Teddy Roosevelt, when he was in the clutches of life and everything had gone wrong and he really bottomed out, where did he go? And he went back to the land, back to the basics, back to finding a spirit. And good leaders are people of spirit. So everybody's worked for the kind of guy or the lady that walks in and goes, just do it because I said so. Nobody likes that. And that's not leadership. And it's not, you know, the old philosophy, to skip off of that for a second, but the old philosophy about teaching somebody how to sail. And that is, you don't teach them how to push the sails up and do all the manual labor. You make them want for the sea. And they will learn how to sail. And so cowboying is the same way. I think our presidents, and again, LBJ went back to the land so many times to find himself, to try to get solace and heal and think about these complex issues that all leaders and all persons face in those kind of roles.
Oh, that's great. Do you think that there's something about the American character that is diminished once the cowboy way of life disappears?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, people in the Americas owe a lot to the American cowboy, because who else but these quirky, tough, hardcore guys that were self-disciplined and answered to no man type attitude came west, and they braved the Indians and they braved the weather and they braved the storms and created this new industry that the world took image to. And it's the greatest testament, I guess, I could speak to in that regard, that there's not a place on the planet, and these are not my words, these were the words of a German visitor to our ranch at one time, and he said, there's not a corner of the world, or maybe in the universe, that nobody knows the great American cowboy. There's a reason for that. One of the stories that I'd like to pass on if I got time,
you do,
is one of our visitors to the ranch, and this lady was Nikita Khrushchev's secretary. And to make a long story short, she was there escorting the Tsar's Gold exhibit to the Houston Museum of Natural Science. We did a program for her to illustrate to her what cowboys do and those kind of things, and she was enamored with my horse, Buck, who was a small dark bay horse, and she started telling in Russian through her translator that the reason why she loved Buck so much is because her father, who was a cavalryman in the Russian army, had bought her a horse that looked just like Buck, and it brought her back again to her roots and her childhood there in the middle of the ranch. And as we talked, we developed a special rapport that was just unusual, and we taught her how to rope, and I was holding her hand to teach her how to swing the lariat rope and how to rope a cow, and she was really thrilled to death with all of this. And excuse me, even though our interview was supposed to only be about 30 minutes, I guess, it went on for several hours, and she was late actually getting to her presentation. She wanted to stay and learn about cowboys and horses and talk about them and knit herself back into her childhood and back to the land. And after she walked away, she reached in her purse and turned around to me, and she handed me a gold coin that kind of looks like the little chocolate dollar candies. And as she handed it to me, she kind of did a half bow, and I really didn't know what to do. So being from Texas, I pulled my hat off and tipped it to her, and I said, thank you very much, and I appreciate that. And so she turned to walk off. I put my hat back on, and as she turned, the interpreter grabbed me by the sleeve, and he said, do you have any idea what that is? And I said, no, I don't. And he said, look, she's honoring you as aristocracy. In the Russian government, back in the old days when she was a little girl, only the aristocracy was allowed to eat chocolate. And after the meal, they had these gold tins they would crack open, and they would pass them around this huge table. And inside that gold tin are small pieces of chocolate, so small that they set a little set of tweezers out for people to take one piece, stick it on their tongue, and just savor it until the flavor went away. And I thought, wow, you know, how do you get an honor like that? And so I stopped her, and I said, tell her to wait a minute. I said I didn't thank her properly because I didn't understand the value of the gift. And as she turned back around, I took my hat off to her and I said, "Excuse me, ma'am, but in Texas, we don't shake hands with women and we don't accept gifts without a hug." And she threw her arms out wide and she grabbed a hold of me, and she was pretty strong, got me in this bear hug and really hugged me real good. And it was great. As she walked away, the killer to the story was I had no idea who this lady was other than some big shot in the old Russian government. And the interpreter went on to tell me that this lady was Nikita Khrushchev's secretary. She sat by a desk with a track bar on it. She always carried a key around her neck, and if the phone rang, Khrushchev would have her take the key, unlock the track bar, and flip the switches. Those switches went to nuclear weapons. And I realized real quickly that that was the lady that I had been scared of all of my childhood growing up. Every time we had an air raid drill, every day we hid under our desk, put our hands over our head, did the drills, and this was the lady that could have blown us all away. And I stood there in a moment just in awe, because I had not only held her hand, the hand that could have actually turned the key and flipped those switches, and it just stopped me dead in my tracks. The power of that meeting. And so I wanted to relay that to you. The final killer of this was when I asked her the question about Nikita Khrushchev, if he really would have thrown the switch. And the interpreter told me that Khrushchev was not worried about John Kennedy. What he was worried about, and as most people know, Khrushchev was an avid Western movie fan. He loved the American West, and he loved cowboys, and he loved all, and he was enamored with it, and all this. She said that Khrushchev was not so worried about John Kennedy because he thought he was bluffing, but because Cuba was so close to Texas. He was worried about the governor of Texas and the cowboys, because in his eye, we wouldn't have been able to be controlled. We would have grabbed our Winchesters and headed out and took it to him. Really took the battle to him. So he wasn't scared of the president. He was scared of the governor of Texas and a bunch of cowboys, stereotypically in Khrushchev's mind, that wouldn't hold back for anything and would fight at the drop of a hat. So it's a long story, but it's one of those stories in life that you never forget. That's got a tremendous group of meanings that are attached with it.
That's a great story. You know, I've never heard that story, and